This is How to Grow a Decacorn, where we give you an inside peek into the real-time adventures of Kraken, a company that's on its way to being worth $10 billion. For the past 72 hours, I have been spending every waking moment trying to solve a mystery. $190 million is missing and no one can find it. In the last episode, we tackled the main events and timeline of this case. In this conclusion episode, we dive deeper into the suspected psychological manipulation, stolen identities, concealed criminal past, greed, revenge, betrayal, and possibly murder. We share interesting observations that others haven't noticed, and we list and analyze what we believe to be the most probable theories. Join us. We're not trained detectives, so we need your help. Will you be able to figure out where the $190 million went and who has it? Kraken brings you part 2 and the conclusion of the curious case of Cotton's coins. So just another reminder, we are not professional investigators. We are not police officers. We are not doctors. So please, we welcome the FBI to look into this. We welcome the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, the RCMP to look into this, any professionally trained body that can actually, have access to information that we don't have access to and has experience investigating things like this. Please get involved. If you know of anybody who works at these places or knows somebody who works at these places, please ask them to help us with this, because the only way, well, it's not the only way, but the best chance that these 115,000 people have at getting their money back that is rightfully theirs, the best chance is going to be for us to find the missing money.
Yeah, hopefully it's not all gambled away, and hopefully it's sitting in the pocket of some thief or on Quadriga's account held at another crypto exchange.
Okay, so it's time now to introduce you to some other people involved in this. Some people think of these people as suspects. We are not the judge of that. So we have Gerald Cotton, co-founder, CEO. The other co-founder, his name is Michel Patron. They both, from what we know, another insider information tip, someone who knew both of them said that they actually first met because they coincidentally trying to con each other at the same time.
Yeah, they said they were like scamming together or something, like somehow met scamming.
Well, I think it was scamming each other. So this is just what somebody has told us. So they met, however they did, probably around 2013. They decided to start a crypto exchange together, named it Quadriga CX for cryptocurrency exchange. They moved to Vancouver, registered it there in mid-2013. I don't know how they met Alex Hannon. Alex Hannon is the chief architect. He's, as far as I'm aware, the only developer they've ever had on the team. Mm-hmm. He coded the platform, the exchange. It's pretty much the three of these men who started Quadriga.
Yeah, I don't know if Alex is technically a co-founder or just, a dev for hire.
He's never been referred to as a co-founder. On his LinkedIn profile, it describes him as an IT consultant. It shows that he's been at Quadriga full time since 2013 until present day. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting. According to the affidavit, Jennifer Robertson's, he has no stake in the company. I find that incredibly suspicious.
I don't find it that suspicious. I mean, this guy, he may have said, guys, like, I think this business is crazy, but if you want to give me a huge salary, I will take this job and I won't ask any questions.
Oh, but problem. because we've read the affidavit, we know that present day time, the 7 contractors that Quadriga employs or pays to do work, there's only 7. He's the only developer. So we've got him, the head of operations, Aaron Matthews, and then there were sort of KYC, like verification support people. Yeah. And the affidavit states that every month, those 7 people were paid a total of $57,000 to $65,000 US every month. So we did the math. If we guess that the architect, Alex Hannon, was getting paid about $20K a month, maybe the the head of operations, director of operations, Alex Matthews, maybe $15K a month, maybe the remaining 5 people are, let's say, $22K a month
in total,
all five of them, which each of them would be like 4,400. This would come out to be $57,000 to $65,000 US a month. So I think, we don't know. We're not psychic. We don't know exactly how much everyone was getting paid. But assuming that everyone is getting paid a reasonable salary, he's not getting much more than $20,000 a month. He's not getting paid much. He's getting paid around, let's say, $200,000 a year. Let's say $250,000 a year, even if you want to go up to $300,000 a year. Is that making up? Would somebody feel like that makes up for getting 0 stake in the company? He coded this exchange himself. The 2 co-founders are not developers. They have no computer science experience as far as we know. He coded and built this with his bare hands. And he's been pretty much, as far as we know, the only developer for 5 years maintaining this exchange. And maintaining an exchange as a developer is very hard to do. It's 24/7, 365. There's a lot of maintenance that needs to be done. And do we really think that he saw that as a good trade-off, and that at no point during the 5 years did he feel like he wanted to say to Gerald, "Hey, Gerald, I've invested a lot of time and energy into this exchange, and it is what it is, and it generates the revenue it generates partly because I created it and I maintain it. Can I have a little bit of equity?"
It's possible that happened. Not everyone values startup equity. It's maybe he just got a cash raise instead. He may have thought things were suspect there and like wanted to keep a bit of an arm's length from the operation. Hard to know.
I still think he'd if that's the case, he'd negotiate higher cash.
Maybe it was higher. I mean, we're just kind of speculating about what his cash comp was.
I suppose so. Okay, so the three of these men, Gerald, Alex, Michael, they form Quadriga together pretty much. So what's interesting about Michel Patron is internet detectives have identified that this is not his original real name.
Right.
His real name, some suspect, is Omar Dahini.
Mm-hmm.
And what would you say? Would you say this is, from what we've seen, is this speculation, or does this seem pretty conclusive?
Yeah, it's pretty conclusive. I'd say there's a preponderance of evidence. It'd be hard to deny. There's so much evidence that this is the same guy.
Not only is this probably the same guy, seems pretty
Probable.
certain it's probably the same guy, but this guy, Omar Dahini, has a very, very troubling past.
Yeah.
So Omar Dahini, or Michel Patron, about 35 years old today. When he was in his early 20s, Omar Dahini was arrested.
And convicted.
And went to jail as a member of what was called Shadow Crew. This was in 2004. I think he might have been 22 years old. Him and a handful of people, they ranged from 20 to in their 40s. They were running a really horrible service where they were stealing and selling people's credit cards, debit cards, IDs, identities.
Mm-hmm.
And they were getting paid for doing this. Their form of payment they were receiving from people who bought these things from them was digital gold.
Right.
They got caught. They were busted. He went to jail. It looks like he did not learn his lesson, unfortunately. He did realize, though, that he should change his name. Allegedly. Mm-hmm. So Michel Patron, he became, at some point after getting out of jail and some point before starting Quadriga with Gerald Cotton. Did Gerald Cotton ever know Michael's real identity or his original name? Does Jennifer Robertson know of his real identity and the things he has done? So 2004, he was arrested and convicted as a member of Shadow Crew. In 2007, 3 years later, he's back at it again, released from prison, started what he called Midas Gold Exchange in Canada. During the following 2 years, from 2007 to 2009, there were many complaints made online about Midas Gold Exchange, and I think also naming him specifically in these complaints. It appears that they were scammy. They were taking people's money. If this is the same person, he has no problem with making money from stealing people's credit cards, debit cards, identities, stealing their money. Is it such a stretch to imagine that at 22 he's okay with stealing people's money, and maybe at 30 years of age in 2013 when he co-founded Quadriga, also okay with stealing people's money?
Even before that, right? With Midas Gold.
With Midas Gold as well, right? Is it a stretch that he has established himself to be stealing money, and at 22, at 25, 26, 27, and that he would continue to do it at 30?
It seems like a pattern of consistent behavior.
MtGox.com, the website. It was registered under a phone number in February 2015, 604-334-2662. A month later, March 14th, 2015, Michel Patron lists on the Quadriga website under contact. If you want to contact somebody with regarding investor relations, contact Michel Patron. Phone number 604-334-2622. These two numbers are off by 1 digit.
Mm-hmm. So super suspect. Either one of those is a typo, or like he got both of those numbers at the same time, like on the same account.
And you might be wondering, okay, that's not conclusive. But what about this? A phone number that was registered with m-gold.com back in 2009. The number is 403-668-0199. When you look that up and see what domains are associated with it, the results are patron.com, patron.net, hdexchange.com, Quadriga coinexchange.com, vfssteroids.com, vaultofsatoshi.com. So we have a known established relationship between M Gold, Midas Gold Exchange, and Omar Danini. And now we have a conclusive known association between mgold.com and Quadriga.
And Michel Patron. Yeah, so almost certainly the same guy. And
as far as we know.
Yeah. And this information has been out for a while. So I mean, it would be hard for Gerald Cotton to ignore this. It's possible he didn't know when he got into business with this guy what his past was, but he certainly would have known later as this kind of information came out. This information has been out for years. People have looked into him and discovered this. So it could have something to do with Michael Patron becoming more distant from the business at some point, at least externally. But assuming that these guys, that the stories are true, that these guys kind of met through scamming each other, and they were both scammers before, and they both know the game, it's possible Gerald Cotton fully knew what he was getting into with Patron, Danini, and then only when Danini was exposed did they have to come up with some story for why Danini was stepping back, or to at least publicly distance Patron from the business, just for optics, because Cotton still had a clean record, at least to the public, still had a clean image, but Patron's image was destroyed. This is not the kind of person you would want to trust to run a financial services company.
And also, yeah, there's other evidence as well. Or other details that tie Patron with Danini. Patron claims that he has spent much of his adult life working with digital currencies. Conveniently, that would be true for Danini as well.
Mm-hmm.
Having gotten involved as early as 22 years old.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this guy has some other interesting characteristics. I've seen a YouTube video of him, and he comes off as extremely rehearsed and disingenuous. And there's other things too, like when describing his background, when describing the projects he's in, it comes off as hard to believe that he's telling the truth. And also on his website, he said he has like a master's degree in social psychology. And I find that, someone looked into this and the school said they didn't have any record of anyone by that name.
Probably by either name. They probably checked both names, yeah.
Yeah, and so, I was thinking like, okay, so if a person were to make up a major, making up that you have a master's in something like social psychology, you must really think very, very highly of your social manipulation skills.
I mean, it's possible, right? Like, just because you major in social psychology doesn't necessarily mean that you have intention or find joy in manipulating people. It could be you find people interesting and you want to understand people better. However, I think in his case, given all the other things we know about him, I think that assuming that he dabbles in unsavory behavior and tends to do things that most of us would consider wrong. Also, studying social psychology, I don't know, it could be telling. Maybe he didn't, there's no record, if there is no record of him having done that at UC Santa Barbara, he claims. He has a master's in social psychology there. If there is no record of him there, maybe he's made that up, and maybe he's fabricated that. Maybe he thinks that it would be believable. Maybe people think that he comes across as somebody who would be a master of or have deep insights into social psychology, and that it would be believable, which would just shows how he views himself.
Mm-hmm.
So Michael Patron claims he went to UC Santa Barbara. Omar Danini was living in Fountain Valley, a suburban city in the OC, Orange County in California, when he was arrested for shadow crew. This is the distance here. We're talking a 2-hour drive between Fountain Valley and UC Santa Barbara. So coincidence that, if these are two completely different people, they also happen to have been at the same time in California, a 2-hour drive apart from each other.
Right. Yeah, it's not believable that they're not the same person. But you said there was some other interesting information about Patron's name. This name, Patron. There's some meaning behind it. But didn't he have wasn't there some entity called like velour or something, which is like French for thief?
So he had, well, this is weird. You want to talk about names?
Yeah, because there's some very interesting names in this case. I mean, people are making up names, right? Jennifer Robertson has at least like 3 different names. Michel Patron has at least 2 names. As far as we know, Gerald Cotton is his real name, but it was misspelled on the death certificate.
So there's people involved who have either peculiar names or there's reason to believe they have changed their names over time. Those people are Michel Patron, who may also be Omar Danini, Jennifer Robertson, Gerald's recent widow now. It is believed that she has gone by other names as well. Jennifer, okay, well, property deeds in 2016 show her name as Jennifer Forgeron. December 1st, 2016, the Nova Scotia Royal Gazette announced she was changing her name from Jennifer Kathleen Margaret Griffith to her current name, Jennifer Kathleen Margaret Robertson.
So we got Griffith, Forgeron, and Robertson.
Well, the sequence was Forgeron, Griffith, Robertson. And she did not, though. We don't know of her taking the last name Cotton.
Right. Did we actually see the will where her parents are named?
I didn't see the will.
Her parents are the new directors of the company.
Well, her stepdad. So there are 3 new directors that were named of Quadriga. They were named on January 25th during a shareholders meeting. The 3 directors are Jennifer Robertson, Thomas Beasley, her stepdad, and Jack Martell. As far as I know, no one seems to have any idea as to who Jack Martell is. But Thomas Beasley is her stepdad.
Okay, I'm just trying to find, I'm seeing if I can pull up the will real quick because I want to see if the names of her parents there match her name.
Or one of her previous names.
Right.
Okay. So we have Jennifer Robertson now. So this woman, she has had a total of, as far as we know, a minimum of 3 different surnames in her lifetime so far. It's not clear why she's changed her names. Someone has suspected that she was married before. Some suspect there may be sort of a Black Widow situation happening here. Is she somebody who murders her husbands? And that's why she has changed her last name so many times. The second person with a different name, a name change, we suspect is Michael. He has gone by different aliases when it comes to registering domains or companies or putting his contact information places. Different, like Omar Patron, Michel Patron, also velour, which is a French word for thief.
Yeah, it's pretty brazen to just name your company Thief.
No, it wasn't his alias.
Oh, that was his alias.
It was one of his aliases. Velour, thief.
Okay. And was he using this in a professional capacity, or this is in part of his scammer group?
I'm not totally clear. I'm not totally clear, but
Let's see.
he owns 17.4% of Quadriga as co-founder. In 2015, so a little over a year after launching Quadriga, he brought on a woman to the team named Lovey Horner. She became, according to a blurb I read on Bloomberg, she became the VP of BD, Business Development. According to that, she started February 5th, 2015, and she has 10.3% of the company. I find it very interesting that as somebody who's starting a little bit over a year after the company was launched, she's getting 10.3% of the company. The co-founder patrons getting 17.4%. The chief architect who built it is getting 0% as far as we're aware.
Mm-hmm.
I find this unusual. I find that interesting. I wonder if this is actually his attempt to distance himself from the exchange by sort of diluting himself.
Well, we only know what the cap table looks like today, right? Patron might have sold a bunch of his stake. He might have had half the company at one point and sold it. Or it could just be that, when they started the company together, Gerald Cotton put in more money or something, or, contributed more somehow and got a larger share of the company.
But you do find it odd that somebody coming on a year later as vice president of business development, and her experience, as far as we can tell prior to that, was costume design. And then following Quadriga, I believe somebody saw that she's currently working on, she currently creates dog apparel design.
Mm-hmm. This is unusual. I mean, yeah, for any business development person to get like that large of a stake of a startup, but it all depends on
without bringing any clear relevant experience.
Right. I mean, that's pretty much like a co-founder, like equity stake. But was she? Were they desperate for her help at the time? Did she put in money herself? Was she working for free for many years? We just don't know how she could have arrived at that amount of equity. Could be many reasons. Also, when Cotton started the business, he was like, 2 or 3 years out of college, like 25 years old. So maybe just not super savvy, just maybe didn't know what he was doing and gave away too much equity to people without vesting or, any real thought about it.
Possibly. So people believe there's reason to believe that Michel Patron and Lovey Horner are romantic partners. And so they were working at Quadriga together until February 29th, 2016. Quadriga issued a press release announcing that 2 of the directors were leaving Quadriga, Lovey Horner, as well as Anthony Maluski. He's the former director as well. He's currently now chairman and CEO of Cobalt 27 Capital Corp. Unknown if he had any stake in the company. So these are the known stakes in the company, according to the affidavit. Jennifer now has Gerald's share, which is 41.2%. Michel Patron has 17.4%, and Lovey Horner has 10.3%. That leaves 31.1% unknown, possibly belonging to other people who we don't know about.
Right. Could be anybody. So I just looked at I found the will, and so the mother's name is Carol Terry, last name Terry, and I guess this is her stepdad, Thomas Beasley. So she doesn't share a name with either of them. Maybe Forgeron was her birth father's last name.
This gets a little weird, so hopefully you like conspiracies. Okay. One of her last names is Forgeron.
Mm-hmm.
The obvious go-to here is forgery, forger.
I did hear that this is a common last name in Canada.
Possibly. But there's one more revelation here when it comes to the names. And this one I actually was saving the best for the last.
Okay. What do you got?
Michel Patron. When I search Patron, Google search Patron, one of the very first results that comes up is Patron, describing a race of demigod-like humanoids from the Death Game Cycle of books by Margaret Weiss and Tracy Hickman. What is this? I look it up on Wikipedia. The Death Gate Cycle is a 7-part series fantasy novel. It's primarily about these two powerful races, the Sartans and the Patrons, spelled the exact same way that Michael spells his last name.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the fallout between these two races and the fight between these two races after a nuclear antimatter holocaust that wipes out all humans. So this book series, the 7-part series, was published between 1990 and 1994. Based on Michael's age, he would have been that time range, he would have been 5 to 10 years old. It's believable that maybe he read this fantasy novel series when he was a kid.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I read a little bit more, right?
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. Death Gate Cycle.
Mm-hmm.
This could be a coincidence. Patron, spelled the exact same way. This is probably a coincidence. Let's see, shall we? Okay. Patrons, in the story, patrons are imprisoned in a 5th prison world called the Labyrinth. Guess who else was imprisoned? Omar Danini.
Mm-hmm.
It says, unlike the Sartans, the patrons were loners, volatile and destructive. Patrons tattooed the runes on themselves and choose their name. So the runes is magic. In the story, they use magic called the runes.
Mm-hmm.
When I look at fan art, which will show if you're watching us on video, when I look at the fan art, there's these swirls tattooed all over the arms as well as chest and neck.
Mm-hmm.
In photos that we see online of Michel Patron, tattoos on both arms, and you can see one in a YouTube video of him talking. You can see one on his neck extending down into his clavicle.
And he chose his own name.
You're right. The Sartans believed to be the good guys, which makes the patrons the bad guys in this fantasy series. It says that the patrons created a lethal, murderous hell where survival was the cruel torture of having hope dangled in your face only to have it ripped away. The patrons traveled and fought in nomadic bands or simply alone. They became even more warlike as they fought against incredible odds to push farther and farther towards escape. Though some patrons did eventually escape, they did so only by climbing on the corpses of those who had come before. This is some dark stuff, and it also has parallels to Danini's life.
Yeah.
Prison, wanting to escape, being a loner, being in hell, needing to fight.
Interesting. It's a hell of a name to pick for yourself, and a hell of a persona to choose and to follow. You know, is he did he see this and think, I'm going to shape my life after this, I'm going to choose this name and I'm going to become a patron in my life? Or was he already like that and decided this name fits?
It's also possible, was he in jail when he was in prison, in his early 20s for Shadow Crew? Was he in jail and this was one of the few things to do, was to read the Death Gate Cycle book series, and maybe he resonated with the patrons?
Very interesting. Some definitely interesting coincidences of name.
So now do you think we should we dive in a little deeper and analyze each person a little bit and talk about from our knowledge as individuals and our own life experiences, as well as from working at a crypto exchange?
Yeah, well, there's one more thing I think like we should talk about, which is just the coincidental timing of Cotton's death. Right? Everything is leading up to his exchange imploding, and then he dies. Is it just like, is it a coincidence, or is there something else going on there? It doesn't seem like a suicide, right? Like, it seems like a very painful way to go. If you love your partner, it seems like a very traumatizing thing to put your partner through. But if not a suicide, and if not a faked death to get away from it, it's just extremely convenient. And I hate to say that, anyone's death is convenient, but it came at a time when he was about to have to give it up and admit that probably he was insolvent and had been running a scam, since like 2017.
Yeah. There's a lot of, when it comes to Gerald Cotton, there's a lot of questions, we know someone who says that they met each other, that Gerald and Patron met each other attempting to con one another. Birds of a feather, maybe they, criminal soulmates, whatever you want to call it. Did they come together deciding to pull off the biggest scam that either of them had ever created to date alone and join forces? Odd that 5 years in, no cash management system for Quadriga?
It seemed like Cotton in many ways was naive. And I wonder if Michel Patron, who by the time they met was a seasoned scam artist, allegedly, didn't kind of like make Cotton for the patsy and kind of set Cotton up for this.
Let's look more closely at Gerald Cotton. Gerald Cotton and Michel Patron supposedly, according to a source we have, met each other when attempting to con one another. Did they get a good laugh out of that? Did they talk about past schemes and scams and decide that they're more powerful together than they are apart? And did they hatch a plan to start an exchange called Quadriga CX, and they were planning to see how much money they could rob from people? So, let's look at what we know now. We know the story. Let's look at what we know and what is suspicious and what's not suspicious. So, no cash management system. Quadriga has no cash management system after operating for 5 years. I find that odd. At some point during the past 5 years, Gerald did not think it was a priority to build a cash management system.
Well, like, this is a very small team, and it got even smaller. It looks like in 2015 or 2016. Looks like he lost several of his key people, and he was probably just constrained for resources. This is a problem at any startup really, is you want to do a lot of things and you just don't have the resources to do them, and especially a problem for these smaller regional exchanges. They don't have the revenue and the capital to build this, and it doesn't, as far as I know, he didn't raise a bunch of money to hire a team to build these things. So I can imagine, it's probably one on a list of many things that just got put on the back burner.
Possibly. What do you think about Gerald not telling his wife a backup plan for the exchange before passing? Do you think it's normal and totally understandable, predictable, reasonable that his wife did not know his password to his computer or to his other devices, and that she did not have the private key or access to the private key, and that he did not write it down anywhere for her?
You know, I think in ordinary life, it makes sense that his wife would not have the backup of the key because, you know, they're together all the time. It's likely that if something happens to him, you know, they get in a car accident or something, right? Like, you wouldn't want the person that you're with all the time to be your backup. So it makes sense that she wouldn't be the person with the backup, at least not the only backup. You know, it makes sense that he's got presumably all kinds of sensitive stuff on his computer, probably doesn't want anybody to have the password to that. So I don't think that that's suspect. You know, the suspect thing, though, is that if he went through the effort of creating a will, he put his family in the will, he put her family in the will, he mentioned the dogs in the will, he then went to India. So he had the foresight to like do some stuff, right? But it is odd that he didn't set anything up for the clients, assuming that the money is there, then he had something to protect. Odd that he didn't set it up, and then odd that, you know, I understand like from the medical report that his death came relatively suddenly. Like he went from bad to like dead in no time, and he may not have had, you know, a chance. He might have been passed out and not able to tell her, but there was definitely some point where he was like living on the toilet for like a day, and you know, could have said like, okay, we need to go to the hospital, and who knows what's going to happen in this Indian hospital, so let me just tell you what to do in case the worst happens, right? It doesn't make sense that he didn't, like, there was clearly some opportunity for him to tell her what she needed to know to take care of the exchange, and he didn't do it. And he either didn't do it because there was nothing to take care of, or because he already had it covered.
I think it's totally reasonable that he, while in the throes of painful, you know, I'm guessing painful diarrhea and fever and you know, stomach aches, that he did not think this is the end for me, and that he did not think, okay, I need to start preparing my new wife to take over my crypto exchange. I think that's reasonable. I agree with you, though, on the part of consistent behavior, or in this case, inconsistent behavior. The same person that creates a will and goes to the detail of putting in there, if my wife dies, I want my 2 chihuahuas to go to her family.
Mm-hmm.
That's like, you're really thinking, you know, 10 steps ahead there.
Mm-hmm.
Would not apply that same approach to the business, the company that he has built from the ground up.
Mm-hmm. Well,
of the past 5 years.
Yeah, this guy had been married for like 6 months tops and manages to put a will together, a succession plan for his wife. But he's been the exchange CEO for 5 years and there's no plan.
Very strange. Also, he had Crohn's disease. And as we know, you have to manage Crohn's disease. So that we know that you have to manage it. You have to take your medication. You have to stay away from foods. You know, you have to be on top of that. There's no cure. You have to manage that. So there's some aspect of him that has discipline. Also, he had a sailboat that was $500,000. He had a plane that was $500,000.
Said to have like never actually fly the plane.
Well, this is actually, I think, support for what we're saying, which is somebody who works, or it might have been more than one person, who works at the sort of, what is it called?
The hangar.
The hangar, where yes,
airstrip.
Where they allow everyone to park their nice planes, you know, personal jets and planes, that somebody working there said that everybody would come and admire Gerald Cotton's plane because it's a very nice plane, $500,000, and that he would never fly it. But the person commented that this is what wealthy people do. They buy a plane, they buy the nicest plane. They are determined to fly it, determined to be a great pilot. But if you do not fly it every weekend, then you become intimidated by the plane and you don't feel like you're going to have control. And so therefore you don't fly it. You either I guess having a plane, piloting a plane is a sort of thing where I feel this way about golf too. If you don't do it regularly and you're not super disciplined, you don't give it enough attention and time, then you're not going to feel comfortable ever flying the plane. So I think that him not flying shows that he's able to feel fear and that he understands and comprehends the need to prepare, which also aligns with him creating the will and to the degree of the detail with the dogs. So and also what we can assume was probably discipline towards managing his Crohn's disease. So there's in some ways, and but then again, people are inconsistent. So is it possible that in some areas he's very disciplined, he manages himself well, and in other areas he's neglectful? It's possible.
Yeah, and speaking of neglect, I don't know if you saw the picture of him like in front of the Taj Mahal with his wife. I mean, it looks like he's put on quite a bit of weight since some of the earlier images that we've seen of him, and
there's a significant difference.
When people have a lot of anxiety and a lot of like emotional distress, like they eat, and it could be, he could have just been eating his feelings over the last year over this predicament that he's in, and with this insolvent exchange, like just the situation getting worse. But also like his health could have deteriorated as a result of that. He's not staying in shape. This could be a contributing factor to the condition that, he found himself in India.
And I'm no doctor, I'm no Crohn's expert, but earlier I read off all the foods that are commonly known to trigger Crohn's disease flare-ups. Yeah. And if you're not eating those things, what are you eating that will allow you to gain weight? So I'm not saying that that's impossible, but it could be that he was also so stressed and possibly was emotionally eating. Maybe he was giving himself Crohn's disease flare-ups, and maybe by the time he got to India, it was the last straw. What else do we have here? Let's think about it. Okay. So in the affidavit, Jennifer says that he told Alex, and that she believes it, Alex Hannon, the architect, the sole developer that we know of. Gerald told Alex that some time ago, quote, some time ago, Gerald switched the crypto movement from the hot to cold wallet, switched it from being automatic to making it manual. Some time ago, he wanted to have to manually send all crypto from the hot wallet to the cold wallet by hand manually instead of having it happen automatically. Why do you think this is weird?
It'd be good to know about the exact timing of this, but one reason could be Alex Hannon just screwed up an Ethereum contract and lost 60,000 Ether, $15 million at the time, 90 million at some point. So he could say, I just don't trust this guy's tech anymore. I'm going to handle this manually. He could also have known that he was insolvent and needed to not manage the funds anymore according to what made technical sense, but according to he's like maybe robbing Peter to pay Paul. It becomes a Ponzi at some point, and he has a shell game, exactly, and he needs to manage that kind of behind the scenes, like out of the view of the other employees, to keep the scam going.
Yeah, could be. Yeah, that could be it. It could also be that that's just another example of an area where he was neglectful and irresponsible, and it wasn't ideal, but given the circumstances, maybe for some reason he felt like that was his best case scenario.
Mm-hmm.
So also strange that he told Jennifer, and it's in the affidavit, Gerald was advancing his personal funds to ensure payments were made to users. So when that 20 million check could not be cashed and got held up, frozen, he began using his personal money to facilitate clients.
Well, if apart from these circumstances, I would say that's a noble thing of the CEO to do, to when the company's bank account gets shut down, to come out of his own pocket to pay people. It's not clear whether he was just kind of processing payments for the company out of his personal account, or he was actually paying out of his real money, like without the expectation of reimbursement. But I think probably he was just paying because the company's bank account was shut down. And we've seen this in the crypto space before, and when you have limited banking options and you got to process withdrawals, I mean, you kind of like, you do whatever you can to get your clients their money. And that could mean, using your own account personally, could mean using your wife's account, could mean, borrowing bank accounts from friends and family, or, whatever. This, to him, he was probably thinking like, if I stop processing withdrawals, like, the business is done. I need to be able to do this, even if it's, I'm going outside of the business technically. But, so I don't find that suspicious. I think if the business bank accounts got shut down and he was able to process withdrawals from his personal account, then that seems like a rational thing to do.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. If he was doing that, then it's kind of a responsible thing to do. Well, sort of. I guess I shouldn't say that, because the most responsible thing would probably be to not take risks with clients' money.
Well, he had no choice, right? Like, people wanted their withdrawals, and he could either say, no, I can't give you withdrawal, or he could do it from his own account.
Yeah. So which do you think is more likely here? Which scenario is more likely? Do you think that Gerald Cotton viewed Quadriga as a cash cow to protect and milk, in which case he would not want to be leaving this world or leaving Quadriga? Or do you think it's more likely that he saw Quadriga as a sinking ship and he needs to jump off board?
I think probably before this Ethereum contract issue, it probably looked like it was going to be a cash cow.
Because if you calculate, have you done any loose calculations of how much money they probably made?
They could have made a few $1 million before that. It was probably generating, more money than he would have at a regular job, in a good month, could generate a significant amount of money. So, I would say he probably saw it as a really good business to be in, up until the time that the ether was lost.
Mm-hmm. Looking at the volume that the exchange kind of did, looking at what fees they charge, looking at their lean team and probably low overhead, I think you told me you estimated maybe they made $4 million in profit. Just between maybe the second half of 2017 and the second half of 2018, so during that 1 year period, maybe they made $4 million profit. That's like you taking a wild guess.
Oh yeah, actually they probably made that before 2017
as well.
But no, I think from the second half of 2017 through the first half of 2018, I think they could have made 5, 10, maybe even $20 million of revenue during that period. So I think they made quite a bit of money during that time, based on the volumes that I saw and the fees that they took, and if the advertised fees are the fees that everyone pays.
So if they could have made that type of money, let's say in in the year 2017,
Yeah, let's say they made 10 million between second half of 2017, first half of 2018.
Okay. So which do you think is more? So that's how good those are the high times. That's as good as when it's good,
Mm-hmm.
when it's a bull market. When it's a bear market and third-party processors are stealing your money and and getting sued by the SEC for fraud, times are not so good. So in your opinion, as the CEO of a crypto exchange who also has been running a crypto exchange for 5 years, which do you think, if you had to guess, put yourself in the shoes of Gerald Cotton, when it's early 2019? Oh, I'm sorry. No, he passed away in December 2018, the end of 2018.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think? And of course, you are your own person. You have your own personality. You have your own, tolerance for risk and, appetite for potential and whatever rewards. But if you had to guess, do you think that at the end of 2018, after everything that's happened, do you think that Gerald was thinking Quadriga was a cash cow that he needed to protect and shield waiting for the next bull run? Or do you think that he was feeling like it was a sinking ship and he had had enough and he wanted to get away?
Probably the latter, right? Because he's coming off of, the last bull run was crazy for many reasons. And, we may never see like another kind of like ICO fever like that again. And he may be feeling like, it's all over. The prices aren't coming back for a long time. I'm not going to be able to survive this winter. Also, my company is in debt, tens of millions of dollars. And he's probably looking at the revenue thinking, okay, like, unless there's some like massive bull run that comes out of nowhere, it's going to take me 10 years to pay this off, assuming that like I can even earn the money and buy these coins back before the price goes up, so I don't think he could be seeing it as a cash cow. I think he would be feeling, I'm stuck in this. I'm stuck. I can continue running this Ponzi, or I can turn myself in, but like there's no positive outcome really.
Yeah, and let's not forget that he had the additional stress of, the burden as CEO of a company to keep morale high. His small team, they had a small team, which means they all probably wore multiple hats. They all probably had a lot of insight into the business.
Mm-hmm.
And they were probably getting freaked out, probably panicking, wanting answers, getting stressed, worried about job security, maybe worried about how things were being run and what kind of company they were a part of. So he also probably had that stress as well. I don't think it's far-fetched for us to consider, like you said, if maybe he, the significant weight gain that we see, just, objectively looking at photos, may have been a result of extreme stress.
Yeah, I mean, the dude could have also had stomach problems like ulcers and stuff, I mean, it's unfortunate we didn't get the autopsy, but he had to be, if my theory is correct, had to just be under incredible stress, thinking about what's going to happen. This is like the next MtGox. Is he going to go to prison?
Death threats.
Yeah, all of this, and also
lose the respect, and credibility, his reputation, his career, his wife, his family, his friends, mm-hmm. his colleagues, and so now the question, so now the question is, was he looking out at such a bleak life at the time, in that moment, mm-hmm. that he felt the one good thing, the one happiness I can have, the one joy in this world, I can take control of my life and I can get married right now and I can go on an epic Indian honeymoon and everything else can be falling apart, but I'm going to start my marriage and I'm going to start my wonderful life with my wonderful bride? Or is it that he thought, this is a way out? maybe I need to put together a plan to get out. And that involves a wedding, a marriage, a will, a honeymoon, and a mysterious sudden death where I'm no longer responsible for Quadriga.
Yeah, it's possible, but, if not for all the evidence supporting his death, I would say, faking your death would seem extremely appealing to somebody in his situation.
Here's some things that make me think he did not fake his own death. Number one, there's many ways to fake your own death that are easier than flying all the way to India and dying of Crohn's disease. Many other ways. He could have gone rock climbing and then just fallen off a cliff, his body unrecoverable. He could have been staged a car accident where the car explodes, body unrecoverable. He could have had a staged burglary gone wrong where he looks like he appears to be kidnapped or killed on the spot. There's many. He could have just gone missing. He could have just walked away and then disappeared when his wife wasn't looking or whatever. There's so many ways for him to have faked his own death, to have to go to India, have a Crohn's disease attack, and then die in a hospital after a feverish spell and painful diarrhea and whatnot. This is very complex. I feel like the only way that somebody would choose to take this approach is if they thought this is so elaborate and complex that surely nobody would believe that I planned all of this.
Mm-hmm. Right. It's so believable with all the evidence.
Yeah. Right. Does it seem, well, it's so unbelievable that it's believable.
Yeah. It's like you couldn't make this up and stage this whole thing,
right,
and get all these characters to play along with you and nobody breaks. This is
a impressive imagination we have here.
Yeah, seems like you thought about this a lot.
Right, I feel like there's the very complex, very nuanced, multi-layered. I feel like that makes it unlikely. I think, some people wonder, he has Crohn's disease. Why would he go to India? I feel like him getting sick in India, it seems like, from your personal anecdote, even if you try really hard, you get traveler's diarrhea. I think that it sounds like, Crohn's disease is not a joke, and that he might have ingested something really heinous that, somebody without Crohn's disease would have had to battle even in a hospital. And for him, unfortunately, it meant the end of his life, sadly.
Mm-hmm.
This leaving $100,000 to his two chihuahuas, I think that this is again reason to believe that he wrote that will with 100% sincerity. If he wrote that
mm-hmm.
will thinking the will is part of his con, why would he go to such detail to leave something for his dog specifically, unless say somebody is really sick in the head and they get off on messing with people, right?
Yeah.
Why would he do that? So I think that's another reason to believe that he did not fake his own death. We know at least one person who attended the funeral. They said the family was genuinely mourning, genuinely sad, crying. I believe that his new wife and his family most likely would insist on seeing the body, which means
mm-hmm.
that he would have to go into the plan knowing he needs a body. So he'd have to go find a body that looks like his body.
Yeah, no way. If the family's not in on it, there's no way.
Now let's look more closely at Alex Hannon, chief architect. So some of the things that are a little bit questionable about him is, even though he built this exchange with his own bare hands from the ground up and has maintained his standing there up until present day, 5 years, seems to be the only developer on the team. He's told Jennifer Robertson, and it appears in the affidavit, that Gerald Cotton was solely responsible for funds, coins, banking, accounting, and he says that the majority of coins were in cold storage. He didn't, even though he's sending the money back and forth from the hot wallet to the cold wallet, at no point did he keep mental track of the rough amount of money. He's worked there for 5 years and hasn't been worried about solvency to the point of asking Gerald Cotton about it or demanding that he has some insight into what's happening. He's told Jennifer that he has in the past accessed Cotton's work email, and also that Cotton used encrypted chat messaging and had set the messages to expire after a short period of time. So in some ways, Alex has no idea what's happening at the company, and in other ways, he built the exchange himself.
Yeah, I don't think that there's anything especially suspect about Alex. I mean, it sounds like he's a guy who's just not very interested in the work he's doing, or on the other hand, he could be receiving a very high salary, with the expectation that he does not ask any questions. Or it could be that he knows the exchange is insolvent. He was responsible for, as far as we know, this missing 60,000 ether, that got locked in the contract due to a bug. So he might have suspected that would have caused the exchange to become insolvent. It's possible that he never asked. It's possible that Gerald Cotton told him that it did not make the exchange insolvent. I mean, their public statement about that was that the exchange is not insolvent. So, he may be blissfully ignorant of that. So, I don't think there's anything super suspect about him. I think it's possible he knew about insolvency, but I don't think there's any reason to believe that he should know how much money is flowing in and out. He should have access to that database of balances, but he obviously doesn't have the private keys.
Alex Hannon and Aaron Matthews told Jennifer Robertson that due to the nature of the business, it's not easy to shut down operations entirely, as there are auto deposits of coins and funds being made to users. So it takes 7 weeks to refuse deposits and to suspend trading. Alex Hannon also said that backups are hourly.
Yeah, so this is suspect. Why not? You can turn the website off instantly. It shouldn't take. Of course, you can't prevent people from sending money to a Bitcoin address. You just can't stop anyone from sending money, but you can send out an email to everyone and tell them, hey, you better stop sending money into this black hole. You can turn off the site so people can't get in and get their deposit addresses. You can make it a lot harder for people to accidentally send money in. And so it's not clear why they didn't do that. I think at the point that they knew that they didn't have access to the cold wallets, that they should have turned off the exchange. That they were doing backups hourly is not great. For an exchange or any financial service where you're moving money around, you want to have up to the transaction backups. You can't have 30 minutes go by and you lose all your data. And so, anything could have happened in that time. So what do you do if you ever have to roll back or you lose your data? To go back 30 minutes, the balances could be all over the place. So that's extremely dangerous to only be backing up once an hour.
Jennifer Robertson, let's look at her at a high level. Big concern is, why did she take the body from the hospital to the hotel, have the hotel staff help with taking it to the embalmer? Even though this is a nice hotel, costing approximately $1,000 a night. I do not see this as being excellent customer service or concierge service. This seems like something that should be in violation of their protocols. I would like to think that there should not be dead bodies being taken to the hotel, that hotel staff would be qualified to transport dead bodies. So that makes me wonder, what is the explanation for this? Did somebody need the dead body to get to the hotel so that they could inspect the dead body without anyone else seeing?
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that they brought the body back. Were they forced to take it out of the hospital? Why back to the hotel and not straight to the embalmer? If they were looking for something, or they wanted to manipulate the body in some way before taking it to the embalmer, what could they possibly do? Like if you had poisoned this guy, you're not going to pump the poison out of his body like back at your hotel. So I don't know what she could have done that would have covered up, a crime, assuming that, there was some crime to cover up. So I feel like this was just maybe a logistical bungle that she somehow wound up having to do something with the body quickly. The hospital forced her out. She didn't realize, oops, I need to get this body to an embalmer before I can take it back to the state or back to Canada. So I don't know. I don't read too much into this. I think it is kind of odd that the hospital ended up handling the arrangements with the embalmer. But, I just don't know what would be potentially criminal about doing this.
People on Reddit say that they received money as Quadriga clients coming from a Robertson or a Robertson Nova, which is the name of Jennifer's property management company. And this angers them because she claimed that she had zero involvement with the company in her affidavit. Mm-hmm. I actually think that this is reasonable because she was engaged to Gerald Cotton. He trusted her immensely, and that is why he left her with everything in the event of his death. So I think that it would not be unheard of for her to give him access to her bank accounts when he needed help because they were losing their third-party payment processors.
Yeah, I agree with you on this. He obviously used his own bank account to facilitate withdrawals to clients. It's no surprise that he would use hers as well.
It took her 7 weeks to shut down the operations of the company. Clearly, during that time, she wanted to get her own matters in order in setting up a trust and then moving Gerald Cotton's possibly up to $9 million worth of assets over to that trust to shield it and protect it, keep it out of the hands of creditors. Is this, necessarily, the most noble thing to do? No, but is there a plausible explanation for that? That does not involve something more sinister than just sort of, self-preservation.
It seems like she delayed the shutdown of the exchange to buy herself time in order to shield her assets. So, I think it's really suspect and really terrible. Yeah, I don't think that there's any real legitimate reason why to wait the 7 weeks to shut down the exchange.
There are things about Jennifer Robertson that I think are understandable. She had a will created after she got married before her honeymoon, quite common. She can't find any physical business records of Quadriga in her home or homes she shared with Gerald. Again, he probably was a very digital person and maybe for security reasons didn't have a lot of papers around. She didn't know his password on his devices or the recovery keys. Again, I think that if he was being responsible and secure, that, she wouldn't know those things, nor would he have them written down somewhere in the house. I think it's a good sign that her in-laws were in his will, and that would indicate that he liked them, that he has met them and has spent time with them. So if she did have sinister intent, then either her parents and her family would have to be oblivious to it and not see that happening as they're spending time with her and Gerald, or she doesn't have a sinister intent. She's not playing some sort of Black Widow game, and it was a genuine relationship with true love, and she was not masterminding his death in any way. Michel Patron. He is by far the most dubious person involved in all of this. We already talked about his past history of stealing credit cards, debit cards, identities, IDs, going to prison for it, coming out, starting Midas Gold Exchange, which received many complaints for being a scam and for stealing people's money. Then he goes to Canada, where he starts Quadriga Exchange, possibly to continue stealing money from people. So there is something manipulative with Michel. For sure, it comes across when he speaks. If you watch any videos of him, he comes across as forced, rehearsed, also slightly irritated somehow the entire time. It definitely does not seem like an approachable person, and seems to also maybe exaggerate a little bit in the things that he says. Gerald was the younger one by 5 years, less experienced in business, less experienced with digital assets, and yet Michel Patron had many years of experience, he claims, running payment services, I think, and casinos and his own companies. He has said that he has experience taking companies public, and yet where is he in all of this? And why does he seem to want to distance himself from the operations of the business? In a February 7th, 2019 article, he gave an interview with a reporter. And it's very odd that he did an interview, because during this difficult time, most people would want to lay low and not attract attention to themselves and not be on the record saying things. So I think somebody who is arrogant, somebody who is maybe a little possibly delusional and overly confident, I think would be the type of person who would maybe really want to do an interview during a time like this. So he made sure to let the reporter know that he was speaking to them from Thailand and that he was headed to Hong Kong. And Jesse, why is Hong Kong interesting?
Well, Hong Kong doesn't have an extradition treaty, so that means if Canada finds him guilty of something, he could be much harder to bring back.
And this is rare. Are there many countries that don't have an extradition treaty?
There are a few. I don't know how many in total. Like Switzerland is another one. But it's interesting that he chooses to go to Hong Kong at this time.
I agree. In the quotes that he gives, it seems a little bit of forced, maybe feigned sympathy for Gerald, referring to him as a ray of sunshine and saying he was like a little brother to him, but then also making sure to slip in his own personal agenda, making a point to stress that they had a fight in 2016 and that he hasn't really been involved or has worked with Gerald since then. Other people quoted in the article say that Gerald and Michel Patron were an odd match, describing Patron as mysterious, dynamic, and a tougher business mind. Patron goes out of his way to what many believe to be lying on the record, saying that he is not Danini. He claims that he had lost touch with Cotton, but felt compelled to reach out to Cotton's widow. If he felt compelled to reach out to Jennifer, then he would be doing it from the kindness of his heart and wanting to be discreet and wanting it to be a thoughtful gesture to let her know that she's not alone during this time and to pay his regards and his sympathies. If that's the case, this is a very sensitive gesture, very sensitive act to make. You would not want to proclaim this to the world. You would not want to tell a reporter this. This would be something you would want to keep to yourself and keep private. The oddest thing about the article is what he says at the end. He says, quote, Jerry was passionate about the digital currency space for as long as the space has existed. It's extremely unfortunate. I hope we are able to retrieve the cold storage coins and fix what's happened to his reputation. So let's dissect that. I hope we are able to retrieve the cold storage coins. We are able to retrieve the coins. If he has been so distant from Quadriga and Gerald Cotton since 2016, he's made statements claiming that he wasn't involved even prior to that in the operations. But why is he then saying we are able to retrieve the coins?
Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like he wanted to have nothing to do with the operation of the business, but now he wants to get credit for the recovery somehow, or at least like to seem like he's making some sort of effort.
Or subconsciously, he feels accountability.
Yeah.
The second part of the sentence, and fix what's happened to his reputation.
Yeah, this is kind of strange. It's like, also, again, not taking any accountability for anything. It's like, it just happened, it's almost like it feels like he feels like he's accountable, but he doesn't want to admit it. It's like you killed somebody and then it's like, oh, look, it's unfortunate what happened to this body.
It's a little emotionally detached. It's a little insensitive. It's a little cold. Somebody has passed away. His family will never have him again. His wife will never see him again. This is a horrible tragedy. He was too young to die at 30 years old. It was sudden. It was unexpected. There's so many things he's never going to experience now. And yet, Michel Patron focuses on what's happening to his reputation.
Mm-hmm.
And not only bringing up his reputation, but what comes across to me as misdirection, what's happened to his reputation. By this point, February 7th, it was very clear that both Gerald Cotton's and Michel Patron's reputation were being called into question or were being damaged or harmed at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And his dubious past, Patron's history, changed name, past crimes, possibly, were being surfaced. So he knows that he is being accused of things. He knows that he seems guilty. He knows that he seems accountable. And yet he's acting as if he's completely oblivious to that and misdirecting, pointing the finger at Gerald. Look at him. Look at his reputation. It's his reputation being harmed, not mine. I have nothing to do with this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very suspect.
What I found to be the most chilling and most creepy of all of the Michel Patron materials and evidence and behavior events was a YouTube video that I stumbled across dated March 2015. First of all, you have to check this out because it's very obvious that something's not quite right with him. He's a bit of an odd speaker. He presents himself a little bit in an odd way. When he speaks, he talks very fast as if it's a rehearsed script. But then he also has this completely blank face and stare when he's speaking. And then when he's not speaking and he's listening to someone else speak or he's waiting for his turn to speak, his body and his facial expressions seem tense and slightly irritated. So it's it's uncomfortable to watch him speak. He's probably not a very approachable person, and he seems forced a lot of the time and exaggerates himself a little bit in his accomplishments. He makes a point to say in the video that he stepped away from operations, at which point Gerald Cotton took full control of operations, and Michel Patron became an advisor September 2014. He makes a point to set this date and draw a line in the sand in this video.
My next question was about the article in Bitcoin Magazine. That's kind of where I first read about what was going on and talked about the nature of the going public and all that stuff. And it titled you as an advisor to Quadriga FinTech, which is this new company that acquired you, essentially. Does that mean that your role is changing within the company, or?
In or around September of last year, Gerald took over most of our operations. Pretty much all operations, all stepped away to work on other projects, including this Pubco deal. So I've been essentially providing advisory services since that time, mostly with the process of going public recently and a few partnerships and collaborations. Gerald is the CEO of the company and will continue to run operations in the public. Quadriga will continue to benefit from my resources and expertise. However, I'm officially an advisor of the company at this point.
But then later in the video, he contradicts himself not once, but twice. Number one, he brings up the topic of verifications and he sighs. He has a very obvious sigh and kind of leans back as if he's reflecting on how much work verifications is right now. And he says, we've been running around dealing with the verifications and new users.
Have been running around dealing with the influx of new users and verifications. It's pretty much caused a huge rush for us. And we've been very, very busy.
Earlier in the video, he says that he has had no involvement with operations since September 2014. Now it's March 2015, and he's sighing as if he's recalling and feeling in that moment the stress of the verifications and new user demands that he's been dealing with lately.
Yeah, he goes back and forth. He's not really consistent about what his involvement in the company is. Sometimes he says, oh, I left and now I'm an advisor. And other times he's talking about all the work that he's doing and the decisions that he's making. So, it's hard to know, is he trying to distance himself and he just can't help himself from taking credit for things, or what?
The second instance of him contradicting himself, this one really gives me the chills. The person asking the questions makes a light comment, joking, "You should buy a big boat," he says to Michel Patron. Michel responds, "Gerald wants a helicopter. He's been asking me for a helicopter for 2 years now."
We think you should buy a really big boat, too.
Gerald wants a helicopter, so I think that might happen. He's been asking me for a helicopter for about 2 years now, so I think he'll get that before we get a boat.
Why is Gerald Cotton, the CEO, majority stakeholder, person solely running the operations? You're not even that involved in the company anymore. Why is he asking you permission to buy a helicopter?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, unless he really is more involved in the company and the guy who's really, the puppet master behind the scenes.
Exactly. Okay, now we all know just about everything now. Any meaningful event or detail or fact or time frame we have discussed. So now we are all in a good position to identify which are the most probable theories and explanations to this whole case. The most probable theory, most likely to be accurate and true, number one, Gerald had an accidental death. No one saw it coming, and it's just a coincidence. It just so happens that this ends up revealing and surfacing the insolvency that people have been hiding for who knows how long.
Yeah, so I think that this is the most likely scenario, that that the death was natural and that it just revealed this scenario, and maybe this scenario kind of played a role into Cotton's deteriorating health over time. Just all the stress and maybe the emotional eating and all of these things kind of leading to not being in good health by the time he gets to India. So, what I think happened was, I think that they were running insolvent since at least June 2017 when they lost the 60,000 Ether to the contract bug. At the time, that was $15 million worth of Ether. I don't think that they would have had $15 million in the bank by then. It's possible that they invested in the Ethereum ICO or something and for some reason had 60,000 Ether sitting around, but it seems unlikely. And, so if they weren't able to buy the coins back right away, at the time it was $250 a coin for Ether, but a week later it was $400 a coin. And 6 months later, it was $1,500 a coin. So the price is quickly getting away from them. Even if they went out like the next day trying to raise $15 million to cover this hole, they wouldn't have been able to get it done in time. So the price, this is like right at the beginning of the bull run, like going into the second half of 2017. So, they must have seen this $15 million hole they have to fill, and then it turns into a $25 million hole, and then a $50 million hole, and then, eventually like a $90 million shortfall of Ether that they have because of this bug. So during that time, they could have taken up, basically like extreme measures like Hail Mary plays, like how are we gonna fill this hole? And the market's going crazy. So maybe they're thinking, okay, we'll just trade this. We'll chase our losses and we'll try to trade into profit, and if you look at the blockchain, you see money moving basically like as soon as it goes into Quadriga, it goes out to another exchange. And so either they're mixing or they're trading on other exchanges. They obviously could have been losing a lot of money doing this. If they were sure the market was going to come down, at any time, but the market just kept going nuts, right? Part of the reason why they couldn't just come out and say like the Ether thing just blew us up. Sorry guys, we think we have to shut down the exchange or this is the situation at least, is that either they were already insolvent at that time and they basically like couldn't reveal that they had been running a Ponzi all that time, or they had been laundering money, and their accounts of them saying things like Patron saying, "I'm a money launderer's dream." A lot of the flows that you see on the blockchain are going through mixers, heavy mixing of all the coins going in and out of Quadriga. So like very suspect stuff, lots of coins going to exchanges with no KYC. If they had been laundering money, this is another reason not to come clean about the insolvency, because the insolvency is going to open up an investigation into everything, and that's going to reveal the money laundering, and the money laundering is the real crime. If they just made a mistake and lost some coins, like that can be forgiven, but law enforcement is not going to forgive a pattern of money laundering for profit over the course of years. And so I feel like they maybe felt like they had to cover that up, and so they kept running the Ponzi, even though they probably had a profitable exchange, and especially if they are actually laundering money, they're probably making pretty good money. So they continue to run it, and then all this other terrible stuff starts to happen. Obviously, like the value of the Ether goes up, and so they have a much bigger hole to fill. Their bank accounts get shut down, and so they can't process fiat withdrawals anymore. They can't take new fiat in. One of their payment processors seems to have stolen like $9 million from them. The situation just keeps getting worse over time, and by the end of 2018, we are like deep into the bear market, and it doesn't really look like there's going to be a way out soon. So Cotton might be thinking like it's getting to be the end here. People can't get fiat out anymore, so they are withdrawing crypto, and this demand for crypto is jacking up the price. And this is apparent, anytime you see an exchange with an out of sync price, like crypto is more expensive there than it should be like at the other major exchanges, that's a sign that like people are having trouble getting money out. They have this demand for withdrawals where the pace of withdrawals now is like exceeding the inbound deposits. And I expect that they were getting kind of tight on like actually being able to fulfill withdrawals. And at some point, we're going like very soon going to have to come clean about the scam. The most suspect thing about this is just the timing of the death. And it seems to be coincidental, but it is very convenient for a number of people. It explains away the keys being lost on the laptop is an excellent diversion away from the real investigation about like what actually happened to all these coins. You know, if you believe the story that they're stuck on the laptop, then you don't need to look into where they all went over time. But you know, I believe that most of the coins are gone, or they're sitting on another exchange somewhere, probably some combination of both. You know, it's the most suspect thing is just that the Cotton died like basically just before he was going to have to come clean about all this. So who benefits from that? I mean, obviously, if Cotton faked his death, there's a benefit into staging this. It doesn't seem like he did that. But Patron obviously benefits, and the wife benefits. So to me, this is the most likely scenario. And I would be looking at to see if the wife inherited any crypto from him, and if Patron had been somehow siphoning off coins over the last few years for himself as well.
It's also a possibility that Patron, because he's made a point to distance himself specifically from September 2014 onward from the operations, I would not be surprised if sometime prior, a little bit prior to September 2014, something bad happened at the company that's traceable and can be tied back to Gerald Cotton and could possibly be tied back to Michel Patron if it wasn't for him documenting, stressing that he no longer was involved in operations, even though we just covered how he contradicts himself and it sounds like he stayed pretty involved longer than he claims he did. Most plausible theory number 2, Gerald Cotton accidentally died. No one expected it, but he had a succession plan in place, and he gave that to most likely Alex Hannon or Michel Patron. And if not those two, then he would have given it to Jennifer Robertson. Whoever became next in line made a quick, fast decision to steal the money, saw an opportunity to let everybody think that the money and coins died with Gerald.
Yeah, this is a possibility. I think those two guys are the most likely ones to be in line to take over the wallets. You know, Patron being a large shareholder and the co-founder, and Hannon being, you know, basically the CTO. So, you know, I think the keys going to Robertson makes less sense because, you know, as husband and wife, they're probably together all the time. You know, they're going to be on a plane together. They're going to be in a car together. An accident would probably take out both of them at the same time. You know, so she's not the ideal candidate to have to take over the keys. So most likely one of those guys, and very possible that they saw the opportunity. They got the keys. The dead man switch went off or whatever, and they got the keys, and they just decided, oh, nobody knows about this. I can just pretend like I don't have anything, and the keys must be on the laptop, and that's, you know, I'll just wait for this to blow over, and, you know, in a few years I'll be rich.
Third most plausible theory is that Jennifer Robertson had something to do with Gerald's death, that it was planned, that she wanted the $9 million for herself, and she possibly was surprised by all of this insolvency drama and the circus that has ensued. So this is the sort of Black Widow theory. The only reason why I think it's so high on the list is because if somebody had something to do with Gerald's death, if somebody murdered Gerald, then she would be the one that would be most able to do it in terms of access and proximity.
people kill for a lot less than $9 million. So she definitely had motive. She had access to him in India, and she was the one that made the decision not to get the autopsy. She's definitely a suspect, but that he included her family in the will, I think says it was more than just kind of like an infatuation with her. She would have to be an extremely good liar to be able to pull this off, I think, and go back to Canada and face all this interrogation and the law enforcement and to deal with shutting down this company and the bankruptcy and all this stuff. If she had really had it her way, she'd been planning more. She knew she was going to do this. It seems like she would have had some other stuff in place, or things would have gone a little bit better for her.
The fourth most plausible theory is a combination of Gerald Cotton, Michel Patron, possibly Alex Hannon. We're all in on the insolvency scam, and somebody wanted to silence Gerald Cotton forever and ensure that he will never be able to rat them out and get the bonus of Gerald Cotton being forever blamed for the missing coins, and then everyone else gets off completely free forever. So in this theory, it would be Michel Patron and or Alex Hannon who have decided that for some reason that now they need to silence Gerald and wrap this up and have him to blame for it.
Could be that he was murdered by someone other than his wife. Like obviously, Patron would have some incentive to do this if he felt animosity toward Cotton, or if he had been stealing money all these years, or if he knew of the insolvency, or he had been involved in money laundering, and he thought Cotton was going to come clean. Obviously, if you feel like it's coming to a head and this whole scam is going to be exposed, you want to be the first one to do it. You don't want your partner to come out and turn you in and take a deal. So if you yourself don't think taking a deal is an option, and you think you're just too culpable and you can't risk your partner reporting you, then taking him out is your best option. So it could be that the Patron and or Hannon somehow pulled this off, but as far as we know, they didn't have access to him in India. Maybe they swapped out his pills or something before he left. It's kind of hard to imagine how they would have gotten to him in India.
Seems complicated to get to him in India and not leaving a trace and not being seen, or sending somebody else and now you have another accomplice. However, at the same time, if they feel as if this insolvency scam is an axe hanging over their head, and just by killing Gerald, they're able to live with that burden taken off of their shoulders, there's a lot of upside there. Also, if prisoner's dilemma, if someone or they were to feel confident that Gerald is the weakest link and that it's only a matter of time before he confesses or he breaks or he rats you out, then you feel like there's a ticking clock and you're going to have to do something eventually. You might as well go ahead and do it now and give yourself peace of mind. So I think that, it's possible, who knows? Maybe there were accomplices. Maybe Gerald decided that he's tired of living a lie. He's tired of being the one that's responsible for shuffling the money around and playing the shell games and keeping the facade going. And he's decided he wants to live an honest life now with his new bride, and wants to confess, and maybe, wants to do that in order to get a deal. Maybe his accomplice or accomplices find out and they have now a sense of urgency.
Yeah.
Most plausible theory number 5, and the last one on our list, Gerald Cotton faked his own death and has run away because he is tired of covering up the insolvency. He fears that it's going to come to a head and going to come to light. Tired of all of the work with the third-party processors and the hostile banking environment, as Quadriga referred to it as, and has run away with all the money in the coins, or some amount of money in coins if some of it's already gone. And he's going to leave behind his new wife, or widow now, to answer all the questions and get all the heat. Maybe he knows that now anyone else who is tied to the insolvency can also be free of that burden, because he's taking full sort of responsibility with that, in terms of everyone thinking that it has died with him.
Yeah, the fake death is kind of great for everybody. It gets everybody off the hook. If they had been siphoning money off over the years, they've got a pretty good stash of crypto for themselves, and they'll just hope that everyone assumes Cotton dead and the keys are lost forever on his laptop, and there's nothing to investigate, and everyone can just move along, and he'll go live his life in India or wherever he ends up, and maybe his wife will come back and see him at some point. I don't know. I feel like it would be extremely hard for him to pull this off without the help of the wife, but I also feel like the family would need to be buying into this as well. Like, the family must have wanted to see the body. I just don't believe that all of these people are in on it, and the people at the hospital as well. And I know it's you can buy death certificates in India, but it seems like there's so many people corroborating this story that many people back in Canada who are going to have to go through interrogations by law enforcement. It just doesn't seem like it's very plausible that he really faked his death. He did it on his own, and all these people are going to be able to withstand like interrogations.
I think the toughest part of that story would be him knowing that his wife and family are going to want to see a body to confirm that he has passed away, and going to want to say goodbye to him one last time. So I feel like the most challenging part of that theory would be him getting a body, a cadaver doppelganger that looks like him, possesses his same birthmarks and features and qualities, and well enough to where he's able to fool his parents, family, and new wife. So there you have it. It's the 5 theories in descending order of what we think would be the plausibility or probability, and that's just based on all of the facts that we've reviewed with you and our own personal experiences in just life. For example, Jesse's experience traveling to India, and then also our experiences working at Kraken, which is one of the world's largest crypto exchanges. And so it comes to an end, the episode of the curious case of Cotton's coins. And I'm really glad that we were able to share all of this with you, because it's going to be so important that we spread awareness about this case, because specifically for these 115,000 clients, we want them to get their 190 million US dollars back, and get it back as soon as possible. There are so many twists, turns, unbelievable moments, strange things, unusual behavior with this case. We've got to get the FBI, we've got to get, the Canadian Police Department involved, and at least at a minimum, talk to these people involved, ask them questions, find out if people have dubious criminal records and past, find out why people are changing their names, find out if these are people's real names. And I really strongly believe that if you just scratch the surface even a little bit, I think some truth is going to come out, and possibly with that, some coins.
Yeah, hopefully. I think for any other exchanges watching, I hope that you check your records and look for any accounts that might belong to Quadriga or any of the principals of the exchange or any of the relatives of anyone there. I think one of the difficult things about this case is going to be that as an exchange, if you're an exchange operator and you wanted to launder money, you have available to you all of the records of your own clients. And so you can steal those identities and you can create accounts on other exchanges with those identities. So it could be that other exchanges where we've seen coins moving on the blockchain, it could be that they have a bunch of Quadriga funds, but they're all in the names. It's under accounts of random people who've had their identity stolen. It could be tough to find, but that's just something to keep in mind as they look out for it.
Even if you are not a crypto company or a financial services company, a business continuity plan and a succession plan is very important. If there's an emergency or there's a disaster, then you want to make sure that your company is going to survive, thrive, be successful without you, and that all of the customers, clients, all of the employees, all of the people who rely on this company can continue to do so. And with the succession plan, it's not pleasant to think about, but life is fragile and people pass away, people retire. And so it's very important to have a plan in place for a new leader to take over if you can no longer lead. And that's going to be good for the company that you have helped build and grow and run. So for any company out there, I hope that listening to this cautionary tale, this really incredibly complex and also fascinating case, that you're able to see firsthand what can happen, what can go wrong if you don't have these things in place. If you have a tip or lead regarding the location of the missing funds or people involved, please go to www.qcxtips.com. Again, that's www.qcxtips.com, where you'll be eligible for a $100,000 reward. This episode covers sensitive topics. Kraken or those featured in this podcast